make it. But happy to see you guys again, and I can see a lot of familiar names on the chat, which is really nice. So yeah, I'll just give a quick intro of UX Kitchen and who we are. We're a UX community based in Nairobi. We essentially want to democratize the design education around Africa. We want to do it in the most fun and engaging way possible. And so we do a lot of networking, we share job opportunities, and we help people to learn. And we have a few exciting things that we've done this year. We've built a website thanks to Tim Chege, who has been our coder and designer for that. So definitely check it out. We'll share the link on the chat. And we also have a YouTube channel where we've released about 5 or 6 videos taking people through our design process. So please like, share, and subscribe to our videos. There's more in store coming soon, and we really want to hear all of the suggestions you have or all the content that you want us to produce, and we'll make sure to get it to you. And that YouTube channel is actually thanks to Tony Mongela, who's on this chat. And he is a really awesome videographer, and he's just been able to get such good quality videos and help us build this YouTube channel. So we're really grateful for that. And yeah, as Injuri said, today is a really special day. It's a really exciting topic, and it's one that I personally have been wanting to hear about a lot. I have like a half-baked portfolio at the moment, and I keep procrastinating on trying to make it because I just have so many questions on like, what is the best way to do it? How can we make it stand out? So I'm just super excited for that. And that talk is going to be given by Seth Trudeau, who is the VP of product at ALX. And I'll just quickly read out his bio. He leads a team that designs learning ecosystems, platform, and experiences for developing ethical, impactful leaders. As a product and service designer, he's built games, simulations, and applications for learners from primary school up through to postgraduate studies. He's almost certainly the worst visual designer you'll ever meet, not my words, in the world of design, but he went to Stanford, so people somehow take him seriously. And yeah, so just before I hand it over to him, just a few ground rules. We'll ask you to stay muted for the duration of the session, and please post your questions on the chat, and we'll revisit them at the end of the session. So thanks. I'll hand over to you, Seth.
Rajay, so vicious. It stings. It cuts when you say I'm the worst visual designer you've ever met. No, just kidding. I wrote that myself because it's true. Hey, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. So just to give you a little bit of background, in this pre-COVID world, I currently live in Mauritius, but in the pre-COVID world, I was in and out of Nairobi pretty much every month. I would usually be in Nairobi for about a week out of every month. And all of my friends in the UX community, I always heard these great things about the UX Kitchen events and the community around it. And I was never in town when one of the events was happening. And so when I got introduced to the team, I was super excited and super geeked. And so really happy to be here with you all tonight, and just very appreciative of everybody who's helped to put this together. So let me just give you the background. As Rajay pointed out, I'm the worst UX or the worst visual designer you've ever met. But here's also what I am. I'm a person who, in the last 5 years, I think I've hired, the number is over a dozen UX designers, product designers, interface designers, like the whole range of all of it. And so in the process of hiring over a dozen different designers, I have seen hundreds, I think literally hundreds of portfolios. And, you know, I think I can start by bursting some bubbles. Because, so, you know, Rajay was saying, like, you know, trying to get, he's got a half-baked portfolio, trying to get it put together. I imagine a lot of us have this secret hope and dream that when we send our portfolio out, the person who's looking at it is looking at it with the same level of love and detail and attention. Hey, hold on, I'm sharing the wrong screen. They're looking at it with the same level of love and detail and attention. You guys get to see my calendar. I hope that was really exciting for you all. Anyway, we hope that they're looking at it with the same kind of love and detail and attention that we put into it. And the reality is that most portfolios that I see, I've probably looked at for less than a minute. And over time, what I've done is basically just developed like a quick approach to how I know what I want to spend more time getting into, and who are the people that I actually want to talk about the opportunities that I have. Like, who do I want to talk with even more? And who are people where it's like immediately like, no, this is just, we'll immediately say, here's a polite decline. And so what I was hoping to do tonight was just kind of walk you through, basically I want to get you inside my head as a person who hires designers, to give you some insight into what a good portfolio looks like. And so I've basically categorized it into 1-star to 5-star. You can, and it might be helpful if you're on the call, pull up your portfolio as we go through this and be honest about where you think you land. And before we get into it, I'll tell you the truth. The truth is that if it's not a 3-star or higher, it's going to get rejected immediately, pretty much with no second thought. And so you definitely want to get 3-star or higher, and really 3-star is only gonna get you there if the rest of the applicant pool isn't necessarily that strong. And so I think it's worth just looking at it and thinking about, how do you make sure you're punching it at least a 3-star level? And the other thing that I'll say from the beginning is that a lot of times what we think it takes to get our portfolio to stand out more is to improve the quality of the visuals. And to some extent that is true. There is definitely a minimum threshold that your visual design skills need to be at. But beyond that, it's actually not the visuals that make the difference between a 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star portfolio. And so I'm going to talk, it does make a difference. I got a few examples I brought along with me tonight. They're all portfolios of friends, because I wanted to make sure I only included things from people that wouldn't come from my life if I was talking about them on YouTube Live. So we'll look at a few examples and then we'll make some time for questions at the end. Okay, so we're going to jump in. We're going to start at the bottom of the barrel. 1-star. This is what happens with a 1-star portfolio right here. On my hiring site, I've got a thing where it says, attach your portfolio link here. And so the last time that I was hiring for designers, I think I probably had somewhere between 80 and 100 applicants in the first week. And so I want to be able to go through and look through portfolios really quickly. I had a surprising number of people that either didn't attach a portfolio at all. You can see this one. This question was not answered. Like, well, you're applying for a design job. And you can actually, if I extended the image just a little bit, you can see that it actually says on there, attach your portfolio link here. And then there's a parenthetical that says, this is what is not a portfolio. And it says, don't link to your CV. So 1-star, like, here's the thing. If you don't have a portfolio, then I hate to be this blunt about it, but if you don't have a portfolio, you're not a designer yet. You might be interested in design. You might be keen to become a designer, but there's no way to show that you are a designer yet. and I saw that there were some people in the chat as they were kind of coming in and introducing themselves saying, I'm new to the field, I'm just transitioning. And so I think hopefully everybody already knows this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you've never been hired to do design, that doesn't mean that you can't have a portfolio. Come up with example projects. I mean, you have probably come across a website that you were like, oh, the usability on this is a problem. Creating an example project on your own as a way of honing your skills and then taking it and putting it into your portfolio, that's a portfolio. Like, it's fine. That's a starting point. And in fact, I would argue that even without any experience, you'll see this as we get there, I think you can get all the way to a 3-star portfolio. It won't necessarily be a 3-star portfolio that will get you hired, but it might get enough attention that you might get some contract work, you might get your foot in the door somewhere. So, but you have to have a portfolio. A CV is not a portfolio. Let me tell you 2 other things that fall into this category real quickly. If your portfolio lives in a piece of design software, and particularly if that piece of design software is not Figma, do not send the proprietary file type. So if I get to attach your portfolio link here and it's a .rar or a .xd, or at this point, honestly, even anything in the Adobe Creative Suite, then the friction to like get the right extensions installed onto my computer so that I can open up your portfolio, it's too much friction. I'm just probably not going to do that, because that might seem like that sounds unfair. But the reality is that I know that more experienced designers don't make that mistake. They don't do that. And so if you're sending it, if you have to send it in a proprietary file type, just go with PDF. PDF is always safe. Everybody knows how to open a PDF. So you'll hear by the end of this, that's not necessarily my recommendation, but if you have to send a file, send it as a PDF, okay? All right, so that's 1 star. Hopefully, we don't have anybody on here who is a 1 star. And if you are, it's actually the easiest one to change. Go from not having a portfolio to having a portfolio, and then you will immediately rise to 2 star. Okay, here's 2 examples of 2 star. And these are things, like, these are literal examples of things that I've had sent to me before. So one of them is like, somebody just sends me a folder with a bunch of images and files in it. Another one is somebody sends me like a link to a Figma board with a bunch of different frames in it. So I say it on the slide, it's not a portfolio. It's work you've done, but there's nothing in it that helps me to make sense of the work that you've done or contextualize your experience in any meaningful way. I'm the one who has to do the work to make meaning of your work. And in the case of a UX designer particularly, sense making, meaning making is a key part of the job. And if I see that you're not doing that even in your own portfolio, immediate red flag. Right away, that's a red flag to me. And I'm not interested. It's just abdicating too much of the responsibility of what your role needs to be. Best case scenario, in this case, I might classify you as like a visual designer that maybe I might have some contract work for. And you might be thinking, oh, well, that's not bad. But even in that case, like, I can go out and find visual designers elsewhere, which takes us to 2-star plus. Here's 2-star plus. You can take a look on the right side. Hopefully you can see here. I'll just kind of mess around with this a little bit. You can see these are a couple of Behance and Dribble sites that people have made. And so here's the thing. There's actually nothing wrong with having a Behance or a Dribble site. It's actually pretty useful to have. There's a lot of value in it. but it's not a portfolio. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit more about why I think that and why I think it matters. And basically, I think it's equivalent to the idea of like, if somebody asks for your CV and you give them like a business card, that's not enough information. It doesn't do enough. And so it just doesn't quite cover enough ground. You should have a business card. Actually, that's not even true anymore. You don't need to have a business card. I don't remember the last time that I had a business card. People used to have business cards. Maybe in this case, we should say like a LinkedIn. Somebody asks you for a CV, you send them your LinkedIn. It's just not quite the same. In this case, it's even worse. Like in the case of like Behance, Dribble, it does something. Right? It definitely shows. I mean, look at these two examples. These are examples of people who are really, really good visual designers. And they're showcasing very high quality visual design work. And that's good. But it just doesn't cover enough of the ground of UX or product design. There are so many things on a Behance or a Dribble site that you're just outsourcing. Again, too much of the design work is being outsourced to the platform. If you take a look at this, you are not doing any of the work of usability. You're not doing any of the work of interaction design. You're honestly not doing a lot of the like color theory work within it. You're not doing a lot of the interface work within it. And so even though it can show me that you're a good visual designer, if I see your Behance or your Dribble, and your Behance or your Dribble could also be something that gets people interested in the rest of your design work. If somebody asks you for your portfolio, it's still just not enough. And so I totally recommend that you have them. Like if you're doing a lot of visual design work, totally makes sense. You should have it, and like you should link to it in all kinds of places. Link to it from your LinkedIn, link to it on your CV, link to it from within your portfolio. All of that's good. It's valuable. It adds a lot, but it can't stand alone. Okay, so you need to make sure that you actually are building a portfolio. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit unexpected here. You might have thought I was going to go to 3 stars because that's how counting usually works. But there's a reason I wanted to jump to 4 stars right away. And it's because these 2 examples of 4-star portfolios are the same 2 people whose Behance and whose Dribble we were looking at here. So you can see, these are great designers. These are actually 2 of the best designers that I know. They have a Behance and Dribble site, like they're out there, but they also have their own portfolio site. And what is happening on their own portfolio site is basically one of the things that really matters here is they've designed these sites themselves. And as a result, it actually serves to showcase what they can do and show off the full scope of their design skills. So that's one thing. I'm going to actually take a look at these as we're talking, because I think I can show you these like static screenshots, but it's really not the same as if you get to see the actual site itself. So this is my friend Josh. This is what his portfolio site looks like. Now, if you look at it, there's a lot that's going on here. I'm going to stick to the main area here, right? And so you come in and right away, you've got an example of something that he has made. And if you do a quick scroll through, you can see all of the different design approaches that he has taken here. Logo design, mobile UX, icons, it's all out there. Now, so far, everything that I've shown you could also have lived on his Behance site. But what's happening here is just like, if you take a look at this, you're seeing so many of his different interaction design choices. Like he built this. It's a nice thing. It actually does a lot because it shows you that not only is he able to do kind of UX interface design, but he's actually doing some front-end development to make this happen, right? You've got this kind of scrolling option here that you can go through and see a bunch of different designs. And so he's made a bunch of interaction design choices here. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Yeah. Oh, right. But it's showing you the full capability that he's got, right? And so that can only happen in the space that he has created for himself. Here's the other one that I want to show. I'm going to go back to, let's go back to Linda's home. It's my friend Linda. And, you know, this is what you see when you land on her site. Hey, no, it's not. All right, I'm going to try and get my way back there. Anyway, this is her portfolio. I mean, she's got tons of experience here. It stands out immediately because it's striking. It looks good. And you can go in, you can take a look at a bunch of different projects that she's worked on. What I think is particularly noteworthy on here, and this is where I'm going to zero in on it, because I said earlier, your visual skills are not necessarily the most important thing that make your portfolio stand out. If you're taking notes at home, what I'm going to say next is like, this is the key takeaway. When I'm looking for design hires, it's great to see the product of their work. But what's even more important to me is what comes down here. I want to understand the process. How did you get there? In particular, because I think UX is a multidisciplinary approach. You're drawing from usability studies, you're drawing from human-computer interaction, you're drawing from behavioral psychology, you're drawing from interaction design, you're drawing from visual design. Like, there's so many things. You're not gonna, if you're listening to that list and you're like, I can't check half those boxes, neither can I. No one checks all the boxes. It's a multidisciplinary, very team-based approach. I want to know how you got to where you got to. So if you look at it, this is what she's narrating here. How did we get there? What was the process that we walked through in order to get there? As you look at them, you can see reference photos, you can see ideation and brainstorming work. And she's really taking you into, this is the process we followed to get to the product that we ultimately produced. This is it. This is the key thing that signals a 3-star to a 4-star. And a 4-star is when I really, really start to pay attention. You need to be able to narrate the process and show the product. By the way, I've also seen a fair number of portfolios that do process narration entirely and never show the product that they have produced. I think that's because there's a lot of like design thinking education out there that kind of educates on the process, but doesn't necessarily help you to develop the basic UX design skills that you need. And so, I mean, those are interesting portfolios that they might like, they kind of trick me a little bit because I start looking through them to be like, okay, yeah, process, interesting. And then I get like a few screens in and I'm like, where's the product? So you got to make sure you've got both. I also just want to show, because this is geeky and I like it. On this portfolio, if you look at this scroll through, most of this is almost entirely focused on product. It's all showing the output of his design process. And it might leave you wondering like, well, so where's his process narration? Seth said this was a 4-star. He does it sneakily. If you go into the how section, it's here. And what he has done is, instead of narrating process for every single project that he's done, he's written what is, in fact, just a masterful essay about doing responsive web design. And would highly encourage anybody to go ahead and track this down and read through it. It's a great essay. It's kind of nerdy. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of nerdy, but I'm kind of nerdy, and so that's okay. But the impression that it leaves, when you read this, you're like, okay, this is a guy who is like deep, deep into his craft. And so that is these are really, really strong portfolios. Okay, I'm going to do a little tangent here about something that I think is interesting related to this. I would say both of the people whose portfolios I'm showing you here, both Josh and Linda, they are both, I would say, 5-star designers. And I've classified their design work as 4-star portfolios. This is a not uncommon phenomenon. A lot of times 5-star designers have 4-star portfolios, and there's a reason why. And I think it has more to do with kind of the specific focus of what we're talking about here tonight, which is basically, how do you make your portfolio stand out to help you to get opportunities, to get your foot in the door, to get access to jobs. And in this case, that's not necessarily what either of these two people are using their portfolios for. Neither one of them is using this as a way to find a new job, because they both are going to be getting, they get offers all the time. They get more offers than they know what to do with. They're using their portfolio as a signal that they can send out to show people the kind of work that they like to do, and to show like the extent to which they're kind of pushing the discipline. These aren't necessarily signaling things that are trying to get them jobs. Now, you can know if you are a 5-star designer who can get away with a 4-star portfolio, because people will just approach you with opportunities. You won't have to go looking for it. It'll come to you. And if it's coming to you, if people are coming to you with opportunities, then you don't have to sweat it. Like, I mean, your portfolio matters. You want to have a good portfolio out there in the world, because otherwise what can happen is somebody comes to you, you're having a phone call with somebody that you've just met, and they're like, oh yeah, I actually, I tracked down I saw your portfolio. I looked it up, I saw it online. And you immediately feel a profound sense of embarrassment and shame. And I mention that as I go into 3-star, because this is my public facing portfolio at the moment. It's on my to-do list that I should probably revamp this and change it up, because it's at least 2.5 or 3 years old. But I wanted to put it out here because I think it can kind of illustrate the kind of minimum threshold that can get you in the door. Because in fact, I think some prior version of this portfolio that probably wasn't a whole lot better was how I got into my current job. So here, let's just talk about what we've got going on here. This is hosted on a website that was designed by the person who put the portfolio together. In some cases, you may be using, a website builder service, Squarespace, Webflow, Netlify. There's tons of them out there, Wix, and that's okay. Because even within a service like that, as compared to a Behance or a Dribble, you get to show off, you get to show off color theory, you get to show off your interaction design, you get to show off your interface design. Like, there's just so much more that you can do, even if you're not actually like coding up the front end, if you're not writing the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can show it off here. And so this is kind of where I think the table stakes are. You've got to be able to show that you've got a space that you've carved out. Now, honestly, you could also do this could be a PDF. Your work could exist in a PDF where you've kind of curated it. You've got a little bit of narration about each piece and what it is and why it's there, and why it's important to you. That can work. This does a lot to show, like, the things, more or less like what you're doing. And if all you need is to get your foot in the door, or if what you need is like, you're already starting to get your foot in the door and somebody just wants to see that there's enough there that they should think that you're credible, this can work. But then sometimes you end up on a phone call years later and somebody's like, I saw your portfolio, and the first thing you do is apologize to them, which is exactly what happened in this case 2 weeks ago. So, but I wanted to put this out there because, I think a lot of times we're worried about getting the perfect thing together. And, this is something that I needed to get something out there. Now, don't do what I did and promise yourself that you're going to get something out there and you're going to fix it, in a month when you have more time. That's what I did. Don't do that. Actually, like, make sure you have the time. Make sure that you're going to craft something that you can put together that'll be out in the world that you can really feel proud of. But yeah, that's a 3-star. So let's talk about what makes something a proper 5-star. And there's really just one key difference that I think exists between a 4-star and a 5-star portfolio. The biggest thing that differentiates a 5-star portfolio from a 4-star portfolio. Okay, so in both cases, they're going to show the process that they use to get to their work. They're going to show the product of work that they got to. That product's going to have a pretty high level of polish on it. What makes a 5-star portfolio different is that the portfolio not only narrates the process, but it narrates the value to the business of the design work. Why did the company choose to undertake this design product? What were they hoping to achieve? How well did it achieve that? Because if you are applying for a design job, so I mean, this is a common thing that I'm sure all of us who have worked in design long enough have run into, that a lot of times you'll work in a company where design basically means like, just put some lipstick on a pig. Like, take this thing and make it look nice. Like, make it shine. Those jobs are out there, and honestly, almost everyone has to go through one of those jobs at some point. Really good design jobs, though, are in companies that understand the business value of good design. And you can signal to those companies that you also understand the business value of good design by talking about the business value of the design work that you have done. And so I'm going to just take a look real quickly at this one. This is my friend Jeff. And you can see I was looking through this earlier, which is why I'm halfway down the page. So take a look at this. What I want to point out about this is that there's nothing particularly fancy in the interface design of this part of his portfolio, but there is a very, very thorough case study that he has put together, and that looks good. So you can see here, what is the specific challenge he was working on? What was he doing? What were the main goals, and why was it valuable to the business? And then he does a super detailed walkthrough of, here was our assessment of the previous state of the design that we had in place. Here's the research that we did. Here's some whiteboarding, some process narration. Here's some ideation work that we started to do. Everything in here just basically tells you this is a guy who is a very capable designer and has a rock solid process that he can do to get you to what ultimately becomes, this, a pretty thoroughly redesigned, but also like nothing super flashy about it. So that's the 5-star. I think that's what the 5-star looks like. And you don't necessarily have to be a 5-star designer to have a 5-star portfolio that will really stand out and get you noticed. I think the one thing I want to just touch on quickly that I think can make a little bit of a difference in the 5 stars. And then I think actually this portfolio is a decent example of how it's targeted. So that portfolio might not stand out as much for an earlier phase or a growth phase company, a company that is like moving at the speed of light. I guess if I were in that position and I saw that portfolio, I would absolutely advance it. I would want to talk to that person. But there's a question that I would have in the back of my mind and that I would try and really sort through in the interview process. And that is, how rigid are you in terms of your adherence to process? Because in kind of faster moving companies, I tell people who are fresh out of design school this all the time. You go to design school because it basically tries to build that process, that design approach into you as deeply as it can, because then when you come out and you actually go into industry, they'll try and break that process all the time. The process that you're like, this is what we've got to do to get from a great insight to a great product, you almost never get to follow that exact process unless you work for a design studio where the process is part of what you're selling. And most of us don't work for a design studio. So, you want to see like, I would want to see like, how well would this person work in a more faster paced environment where you don't necessarily have the time to go through that entire process just to redesign the homepage. And so there are ways that you might, if you're looking at how to find new opportunities, you might want to have different versions of that portfolio that differ just a little bit based on the kinds of companies that you're going for. This 5-star portfolio, it is incredible if you're looking to work for a big, well-established company that actually will invest the time into doing a thorough design process every single time. You can look it up. This guy, he's a designer at Microsoft. And so that's kind of a better fit for that portfolio. He could have done a similar version of it. He could have done another project on his site that shows kind of what a more quick and dirty design process looks like. But there's essentially then just 3 core ingredients here. You got to have the process, you got to have the product, and you got to have the business value. Like, you do those 3 things, and that's going to be a portfolio that will absolutely, no question, stand out and get more than 60 seconds of somebody's time. So that's my walkthrough of 5-star portfolios. I think I'm gonna step back and maybe there are some questions. I haven't really kept my eye on the chat, so I don't know for sure.
All right, thanks so much for that awesome presentation, Seth. I'm sure people have questions. Feel free to type them into the chat and I'll relay them to Seth. And I actually have a question for everyone here. So Seth talked about how he has a portfolio that's about 2 to 3 years old that he still has to get around to updating. How many of you here are in a similar position and have just been procrastinating on this? You can just react with a thumbs up.
It's okay. You can own it, guys. You can own it.
All right, we've got one from Suleiman. Anyone else? Wow, I'm impressed then. You guys must be really on top of things. Okay, we've got a few more. Jury as well. Anne as well. Yeah. So I hope after this session you'll be a bit more motivated to get working on those portfolios and creating some time. Actually, I have a couple of questions for Seth, and as you can think of more questions, please add them into the chat. So I was just wondering, what if you worked on a project within a team with a bunch of people, and it's in a real world context, and you've maybe run into problems, or maybe the product hasn't gone fully through. Like, how would you advise on someone to present that within a portfolio? Because if someone might still want to present it because they put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation, always. So I think what you want to do with that, so there's 2 ways to approach it, and I think it depends on how much you have that you can put into your portfolio. Because obviously, if you're spoiled for choice, then it's possible that you can just kind of leave it out. But I think the other thing is to recognize that even within choppy waters, even in projects that kind of go poorly, that don't land exactly where they wanted to, there's usually something in it that was good. There's some piece of it that that represents some really solid work. So maybe you did like some fantastic user research that you were able to translate into a really good report with some like really key insights in it. Then, maybe you don't really show much of the rest of that project, and all you really show is, hey, here's what I did on the user research side. And so every project doesn't necessarily have to show all of the skills that you have, but within your portfolio, you want to be able to represent everything. And so, if that project, it turns out at the end that your actual interface was a hot mess, then just don't show that part and find another example of when your interface was not a hot mess and show that.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that's really good advice. Anyone else want to ask any questions? Jury, do you have any?
Yeah, so my question would be, you see how you go to interviews and they ask you, what are some of your weaknesses, especially like in the design spectrum? So for example, you would say maybe you're not great at visual, right? And yeah, even me, I'm not great at visual. So is it okay to put that on your portfolio, kind of like the level of your skills? Or how can you intelligently let this person know you're great at process, but you're still working on visual, or it's not something you're too interested in?
Yeah, so there might be a whole separate talk about interviewing for these kind of roles. And I might not necessarily even be the right person to talk about that as much. So I've seen, I mean, it's a common thing that I think I see on a lot of, it shows up less on portfolios and more on designer CVs, where they do a thing and they show like, here's my level of competency with all of these different things. I don't really pay much attention to that, just because it's like, I don't know what your standard is on this stuff. Oh, on the question of like, what are weaknesses, what are growth areas? I think, I guess they ask you weaknesses, or maybe they say it politely and they say growth areas. I think the way you answer those questions pretty much always comes down to, you can share candidly about about the areas where you're not as strong, where you're not as confident. And you always want to just be able to match it with being able to talk about why you've been able to mitigate it in the past. How, even given this, why are you still able to deliver consistently great work? Because of course you are. And anything that you're doing to address it. If you're conscious that it's something you want to be able to address, and if you're doing things to address it, you can always speak to that. And I think there's a difference between a thing that is just in general, like it's a weakness because everybody has weaknesses, and a thing that is like a glaring weakness, like a thing where it's like a fatal flaw. And if it's a fatal flaw, don't wait for a job interview to get it exposed. Be intentional about identifying it for yourself and starting to address it.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's quite subjective, like the way people judge their own skills. So I can only imagine it's tricky for someone who's hiring to be able to tell like if how good they are at a certain skill. So I've got a few more questions. There's one question from Paul asking how you would rate a portfolio with a link that he's shared. But I'm wondering if we should quickly go to the other questions and see if we have any time for that one at the end, or perhaps you can take a quick look if you have any time and we can relay the review on Slack or something. And so we have another question.
No, I mean, maybe we can do that. Yeah. Let's take the straight up questions, and then if we have time at the end, I'll do like a 3 to 5 minute walkthrough on that portfolio.
Okay, cool. All right, so we have a question from Ryan, and he asks, is there such a thing as over-explaining the process?
There is such a thing as over-explaining the process. So I will say, like, I think that case study that I showed you guys on that 5-star portfolio comes close. It comes close to walking up to the edge on it. I think a lot of it has to do with, so you kind of just want to think proportionally between product and process. So like, if you do all of that process narration and it's like, and the outcome is a landing page, then like, that's a lot of process. And that's going to make me feel concerned, because I'm like, is that how much process you need to get to that kind of product? So there's definitely the ability to over-explain process, but I would say, maybe I see in 100 portfolios, maybe I see 3 that have over-explained process, and I probably see 50 that don't have any process narration at all. So you can be cautious about it, but in general, most people need to correct in the other direction.
Yeah, I guess it's a very fine line between like what is enough and what's too much. And I guess each and every project has its own version of that. So so we have one question from Francis. For a person jumping into the field, could you share an example of how they would be able to show business value in their personal projects?
Yeah. So if you were doing, so I'm going to use just the typical, there's like a common design assignment that you'll get if you're doing like agency work. Like people, if you're getting hired in agency work, you'll see this all the time. It's redesign the Craigslist front page. And so, I mean, it's a personal project, right? Like ultimately you're just doing it. And in that case, what you can always show is basically, if you were working in a company, they would kind of be able to say to you, hey, here's what we see, here's what the outcome ultimately needs to be. For a personal project, you're going to kind of have to reverse engineer that. You're going to look at a site and you're going to think, so let's use the Craigslist as an example. In the case of Craigslist, like you want to be able to improve overall content discovery in order to increase engagement or to decrease the bounce rate, right? Let's say you can fill in an assumption. Most people will bounce off of this site within 7 seconds if they don't see something that's interesting to them. And so in order to keep more people on the site, we are redesigning it to make sure that people will see something of interest to them within 7 seconds. And then you show, based on that challenge, that prompt, you've got certain constraints you're going to have to work within, and you have a challenge that you're responding to that can create value for the business. How would you design it, right? Because I mean, you can look at that website and just be like, I mean, I would change the typeface. I would introduce more visual elements. Like all of that stuff's, anybody's going to do that no matter what. But basically take the personal project and design it towards a specific outcome rather than just trying to design it for aesthetic value in general.
Thank you. And we've got one last question, and then maybe we can move to the quick 3 to 5 minute walkthrough. So this is from Joy. If you've done some development work front end, is it okay to do them on a design portfolio? So for example, you have a development section and a design section.
Doesn't hurt. I mean, I think if you have the time to do it, right? Like, and can make it happen, do the front end work on your own portfolio and do some interesting things. You don't have to do like all the way maxed out, but do a couple things that'll catch people's attention and show them that you're able to do some meaningful work that marries design and development together. If you can do that, that is a clear differentiator that really has some wow factor to it. So yes, you can definitely just be like, here's some design elements and here's some development elements. You'll also see some people that'll do things where they'll have, you could think about like almost like the information architecture behind it. You know, some things will clearly be indicated as development and some will be indicated as design, even if they're all married together into one space. There's lots of ways to solve for it, but yeah, don't feel like you have to leave out dev work, particularly if you're looking for, UX kinds of jobs, because having dev background there does make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely, at least from my previous workplace, like I think people would have loved to see a mixture of dev and design work for one person. And we have, I hope I'm going to say your name correctly, Lemuel. I think you raised your hand. Did you want to ask a question? Yeah.
Hey, Seth. It's nice to meet you.
Meet you.
Sorry?
Is it good to meet you, Lemuel? I work with a guy named Lemuel.
Yeah, it's a rare name. We're like unicorns. So as I've heard you speak, one thing that stood out for me, it sounds like you have a community of UXers, product designers around you. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit about how you put that community together and how you sustain it. Do you have like a support group? You guys meet up for like poker and talk about UX projects? Because I really think these communities can be really powerful in like uplifting each other, in also even just exploring cool projects together. So yeah, I'm just curious to hear how do you maintain transparency, because it sounds like you know everything that's going on in their lives.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, some of the examples that I've shown you. So I've got a bunch of people where I think we ultimately realized that our professional lives converged into UX and product work. But that wasn't actually originally why we became friends. So that's a quirky one. I've got like, of my probably half dozen closest friends, 4 of them work in UX or product. But when we became friends, that was not at all the case. So that's just kind of been a nice benefit to friendship, I guess. But I think that's also worth noting. Like, I hire people. So this was mostly focused on portfolio and making your portfolio stand out. I hire people that that I'm going to enjoy working with. Like that's just been a constant through line for me. And it's helped me to build my community, because I've hired people who have moved on and gone into other spaces and done work elsewhere. And I hire people that I'll enjoy working with, and then I try and make it possible that our work together can be enjoyable. And that builds a really strong bond, and that bond endures. And also I think a lot of UX people just do a good job of building community overall. It doesn't have the same kind of cutthroat element that you see in a lot of the design world. I mean, some places in it do, unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, I think I've just been intentional about the people that I like to work with, and that's paid its dividends in time. And then just keep up on people's careers and their lives, and that is what it is. All right, so here's what I'm going to do, since I think we might be basically coming up on time. Is that right?
Yeah, we've got about 2 minutes.
If you guys want to do like the formal close off, and then if people want to stick around, I'll do like a 5-minute walkthrough, just quick reactions on the portfolio that got sent. And if people want to stick around for it, I'm happy to do it. And if not, we can be done.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I can hand it over to Injury to do the formal closing, and then we can hand it back to you for anyone who wants to stay.
Okay, cool. So maybe just to follow up on Lemuel's question, I also feel bad about the pandemic because we've not been able to hang out. And we used to have a legit community like hangout, like we'd have wine, and we'd have snacks, and then we'd meet at iHub and talk about design and make jokes. It was so cool to like make designer friends. And it sucks that now we have to do it like on screen, and that's something we have no control over. I can't wait for the vaccination thing to happen, so that hopefully we could go back to that, I don't know, sometime later in the year, or maybe sometime early next year. Yeah. So, but how you do it virtually right now, just identify people that could be your mentors as well. People you want to talk design with. You can have like a virtual hangout. Like I think Google does a virtual hangout, Google UXers, I think on YouTube, right? And then now there's Clubhouse. Clubhouse also has like a couple of groups where you could just join in, and then you find, if you, let's say, if you're part of a UX group, you'd find that just hanging out, you could talk to people, network with guys. Yeah, I think those are the two that I would say. And then now, just in the Kenyan market, just identify people, gather guys, ask them if they want to hang out on a Friday, like over drinks, virtually, and just talk UX. Yeah. So I think that was important actually in this day and age of virtual life. All right. So to close this off, I am going to say thank you very much for all that made it for this conversation. I think we were about 40 at the when we were the most. So there's also guys who are joining us from the YouTube live. Rajay is also sharing our YouTube channel link on the chat, so be sure to subscribe and check out the videos we release. We try to release something every week, just a short 5-minute video of a topic or the other, and it's always fun, and Tony helps us with that. Be sure to check out our site as well. I don't know if Rajay has shared the, yeah, so okay, Rajay will share. All right, so thanks again, and thank you so much, Seth, for making time for us, for preparing something that was very, easy to digest, the whole 5-star, 1-star. I really loved it because it's easy now to remember, what was 3-star like, what was 4-star like. Even as a beginner, you'd be like, I really want to stand out as a 5-star kind of person, right? So I really love that, and thank you so much for making time for that as well. All right, so without further ado, I guess we're just gonna close this out. I'm gonna end the YouTube live, and then we can go back to Seth to check out the site that Paul had shared. Thank you guys, and have a great evening. Take care of yourselves, double mask if you can, sanitize, social distance, no clubbing.